This lesson will focus on balancing slightly more complicated equations than the first one. I've moved down to the bottom part of the sheet, and as you can see, the equations are longer and slightly more complicated. Still starting in the same way. So I'll start with 16. I'm going to look here as an aluminum, and over here I have two aluminums. So I shall put a 2 in front, and that will balance the aluminum. Now if I look at some of the other things in this equation, the hydrogens appear to have 2 already each, so I'm going to leave them for now, but I have to look at this group here of SO4. I'm going to highlight the whole group. It is easier to count that as a group. Now this SO4 group has a 3 on the outside. That 3 outside the bracket applies to everything inside the bracket. So really, I need to have 3 in front of this to balance that 3 outside the bracket. That 3 applies to my hydrogen, so 3 times 2 is 6 hydrogen. So over here, I need to have 3 times 2 to make 6 hydrogen. Our next question also has brackets. So I think what I will start with is the chlorine. There's 2 here and 3 here, and 2 there. 3 and 2, it's easiest to make 6. So if I put a 2 in the front, I'll get 6 chlorine. And if I put a 3 here, I'll get 6 chlorine. Now, that 2 gave me 2 iron, so I'm going to go do the iron right away with a 2. And this 3 here gives me 3 calcium, so I'll do 3 with the calcium. Now, all that's left to check is if I have the right number of oxygen and hydrogen, so I have to do a little multiplying. 3 in the front and a 2 on the outside means I have 6 oxygen, and again, 3 times 2 means I have 6 hydrogen. This side, I have 2 times 3, so 6 oxygen, and 2 times 3, 6 hydrogen. My oxygen and my hydrogen balanced automatically, so I don't need to change any numbers in this equation. If your last 2 elements balance automatically, it's a good sign to you that you've done the question correctly. So we'll look at the next one, which also has brackets. So I'm going to highlight NO3 inside the bracket here, and I'm going to look for that group on the other side of the arrow. Here it is. This time it has no bracket, and over here it has 2. So I'm going to take a 2 in front of the KNO3. That 2 also applies to the K, but my K has a 2, so I'll just check it off. I don't need to add any more. And I think the rest of this looks okay. I have CrO4 and CrO4, there's no brackets, and I have a PB on each side. The 4 here, I should mention, only applies to the oxygen. It does not apply to the chromium. If it's a number that hangs off an element, it's only for that element. It applies to the group if it's outside of a bracket. Another example like that, brackets all over the place on this one. So NO3, I'm going to find my group, and I'm going to go to this side and find the group. I can see this one doesn't have a bracket, and it needs to have a 2 because the one on the other side has a bracket for 2. So I'll put my 2 there. Now that 2 is for this group of NH4, which I'll just highlight in blue for you. That's this group here, and it already has a 2, so I'm going to check that guy off. It's good. And I just need to check what's left. I have a cadmium here, and there's only 1, and I have 1 there. And I have a sulfur here, and there's 1, and I have 1 there, so that one is balanced. And that's more complicated equation balance. The very last kind that you might want to look at is something that you have to double the equations on. To do that, it's usually something involving a carbon with a combustion. They tend to look complicated, and they give you odd numbers. So I'm going to do 12, I think, is our example. Carbon here has 3, so I'm going to put a 3 there. And hydrogen has 7 plus 1, so I have 8 hydrogens, so I'm going to put a 4 here. Now I have to count all of my oxygens. I'm going to do that with highlighting for you. I have 4 oxygens here, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have 3 times 2, so I have 6 oxygen here. I think instead of highlighting, I'm going to make that a 6. And I'll do it with numbers. So on this whole side of the arrow, on this end of my arrow, I have a 6 plus a 4, which means I'd like to have 10 oxygen. If I go to this side, I've used 1 here, which means I have 9 left to figure out. So to make 9 oxygen, I would like to make 4.5. 4.5 is not allowed. You can't have half a molecule. So when you get a half, what you do is double the entire equation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this whole equation for you. without my numbers in it, C3H7OH plus O2, arrow, CO2 plus H2O. And now I'm going to go through and I'm going to double each number in the front. So over here I don't have a number, which means I'll double 1 to 2. This is 4.5, so I'll make that a 9. This is 3, so I'll make that 6. And this is a 4, so I will make that 8. By doubling the whole equation, I've gotten rid of my half. This only happens in complicated combustions, and it is the most difficult but the most uncommon type of question you'll get asked.